Marcus Chen rubbed his tired eyes and checked the navigation screen again. Something was wrong. The numbers didn't make sense anymore. His cargo ship was supposed to reach the mining station in 6 hours, but now the computer showed he was heading into empty space. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered, tapping the screen. The ship was old, but it had never failed him like this before. Outside the small window, space looked different. The stars were brighter, and there was a strange purple glow in the distance. Marcus had been flying cargo runs for 10 years, and he had never seen anything like it. The ship started shaking. Warning lights flashed red all over the control panel. The navigation system went completely dead. Marcus grabbed the controls and tried to steady the ship, but it was no use. Something was pulling him toward that purple glow. "Emergency systems online," the computer said in its calm voice. "Solar storm detected. Navigation offline. Prepare for emergency landing." Marcus's heart pounded. There wasn't supposed to be anything to land on out here. But as his ship spun toward the purple light, he saw it. A small moon covered in strange glowing crystals. The ship hit the ground hard. Marcus was thrown against his seat as metal groaned and sparked around him. When everything stopped moving, he sat in the dark for a moment, breathing heavily. He was alive, but his ship was definitely not flying anywhere soon. Marcus put on his emergency suit and stepped outside. The moon's air was thin but breathable. The purple crystals were everywhere, growing out of the ground like trees. They hummed softly and gave off enough light to see by. He was looking at his broken ship when he heard the noise. It sounded like thunder, but it came from the sky. Marcus looked up and saw them, ships unlike anything he had ever seen before. Some of the ships looked like they were made of the same crystals as the ones on the ground. They moved smoothly through the air, almost like they were dancing. The other ships were different, big, dark, and covered in metal spikes. They moved in straight lines and made loud, angry noises. The two groups of ships were fighting. Bright beams of light shot between them and explosions lit up the sky. Marcus had never seen a space battle before, but he knew he was in the middle of one. One of the dark ships got hit and started falling. It crashed into the crystal forest about 100 yards away from Marcus. The ground shook and some of the crystals broke and fell down. Marcus was about to run back to his ship when he saw something moving near the crashed ship. It was small and seemed to glow with a soft blue light. As it got closer, Marcus realized it wasn't human at all. The creature looked like a child, but it had shiny scales instead of skin. Its eyes were huge and dark, and it moved on 4 legs instead of 2. It was beautiful in a way that made Marcus's chest feel tight. The little creature seemed lost and scared. It kept looking up at the sky where the crystal ships were still fighting the dark ones. Marcus could tell it belonged with the crystal ships, but they were too busy fighting to notice one small creature on the ground. That's when Marcus smelled it. A sharp, burning smell that made his nose hurt. He looked at the crashed ship and saw green smoke coming out of it. His suit's computer started beeping warnings. "Radiation detected," the suit said. "Dangerous levels. Seek shelter immediately." The little creature was standing right in the path of the green smoke. It didn't seem to understand the danger. It just stood there looking up at the sky and making soft, musical sounds. Marcus didn't think. He just ran. The radiation was getting stronger. His suit's warnings got louder and more urgent. The little creature finally noticed the green smoke and tried to move, but it was too late. The cloud was spreading fast. Marcus reached the creature just as the radiation cloud surrounded them both. Without stopping, he threw himself on top of the small being, covering it completely with his body. The radiation hit him like fire. Even through his suit, he could feel it burning his skin. His suit's systems screamed warnings as the radiation levels climbed higher and higher. The numbers on his display kept getting worse. Yellow, orange, red, then flashing red. The little creature was warm under him. It had stopped making sounds and was perfectly still. Marcus hoped he wasn't too heavy for it. His back felt like it was on fire, but he didn't move. Then the crashed ship exploded. The blast was huge. Pieces of burning metal flew through the air like deadly rain. Marcus felt several chunks hit his back and shoulders. His suit tore in 3 places. Warning alarms were going off so loud he couldn't think, but he didn't move. The little creature was safe under him, and that was all that mattered. The explosion lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like hours. When it was over, Marcus could barely breathe. His suit was broken, and he was breathing the moon's thin air directly. Everything hurt, especially his back where the metal pieces had hit him. The radiation cloud was finally clearing. Marcus tried to push himself up, but his arms wouldn't work right. Everything felt heavy and wrong. He managed to lift his head enough to look down at the little creature. It was okay. Its scales were still glowing softly, and its big dark eyes were looking up at him with something that might have been gratitude. It made a soft singing sound. "You're welcome," Marcus whispered, even though he knew it couldn't understand him. That's when he heard the new sounds, different from the explosions and ship engines. These sounds were musical, like wind chimes. The little creature's eyes got bright, and it made happy noises. Marcus tried to turn his head to see what was coming, but moving hurt too much. His vision was getting dark around the edges. He could hear footsteps, lots of them, coming closer. The little creature wiggled out from under him and stood up. It wasn't hurt at all. It ran toward the footsteps, making excited singing sounds. Marcus heard voices, but they didn't sound like any language he knew. They were musical, like the little creature's sounds, but deeper and more complex. He felt gentle hands touch his shoulders, and someone said something in that musical language. The last thing Marcus saw before everything went dark was a face looking down at him. It was beautiful and strange, with the same kind of scales as the little creature, but silver instead of blue. The being's eyes were full of something Marcus had never seen before, complete wonder and respect. Then the darkness took him. When the crystal ships found them, they saw something they had never expected to see. A strange alien creature had thrown itself over their young princess, taking deadly radiation and explosive debris to protect her. The alien was unconscious and badly hurt, but still breathing. Princess Kira was completely unharmed. The crystal beings had never heard of such a thing. In all their long history, no creature had ever sacrificed itself to protect someone from another species. They carefully lifted the injured alien and carried him to their ship, with little Princess Kira refusing to leave his side. The queen would want to meet this strange, brave creature. If he lived. Marcus woke up slowly, like swimming up from the bottom of a deep, warm pool. Everything felt soft and strange. The bed beneath him seemed to be breathing, rising and falling gently. The walls around him glowed with the same purple light he had seen on the moon, but softer and more peaceful. He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy and weak. That's when he noticed the tubes. They were growing out of the walls and connected to his arms and chest. But they didn't hurt. Instead, they felt warm and comforting, like being hugged. "Where am I?" he said out loud. His voice sounded rough and tired. A soft musical sound came from beside the bed. Marcus turned his head and saw the little creature he had protected. It looked much better now. Its blue scales were bright and shiny, and its big eyes were full of life. When it saw him looking, it made happy singing noises. "Hey there, little one," Marcus said softly. "Are you okay?" The creature moved closer and gently touched his hand with one of its small paws. Marcus felt something strange happen. Suddenly, he could sense the creature's emotions. It was grateful and happy and somehow proud of him. The feeling was so strong it almost made him cry. A door opened in the wall, except it didn't really open, it just melted away like water. A tall being walked in, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. It was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. She looked like the little one, but much larger and more graceful. Her scales were silver and seemed to shift color in the light. She moved like she was floating instead of walking. When she looked at Marcus, her eyes held intelligence older than anything he could imagine. "Greetings, brave one," she said. Her voice was like music, but Marcus could understand every word. "I am Queen Lyrily of the Zephyrian Empire. You are aboard our healing ship." "Zephyrian?" Marcus tried to sit up again. "I'm human. My name is Marcus Chen." The queen's eyes grew wide with interest. "Human," she repeated like she was tasting the word. "We have never encountered your species before. You are far from any space we know." Marcus looked around the room again. Everything was alive somehow, the walls, the bed, even the tubes that were connected to him. "What is this place? What are those tubes doing to me?" "You were dying," the queen said simply. "The radiation poisoned your body, and the metal pieces damaged your organs. Our biohealers are repairing you, but it will take time." The little creature, Princess Kira, Marcus learned, made soft sounds and moved closer to the bed. The queen smiled when she saw this. "My granddaughter has not left your side since we brought you here," Queen Lyrily said. "She has been very worried about you." "Granddaughter?" Marcus looked at the small being with new respect. She's a princess? The heir to our empire, the queen said, and you saved her life at the cost of your own. This creates what we call Kethmarin, a sacred bond between souls. Marcus didn't like the sound of that. Look, Your Majesty, I appreciate you helping me, but I need to get back to my own people. They'll be looking for me. The queen's expression became sad and gentle. I'm afraid that is not possible, Marcus Chen. The Kethmarin bond cannot be broken. You are now a guardian of the royal line, bound to protect Kira for as long as you live. But I have a life, Marcus protested. I have work to do, places to go. And now you have a higher purpose, the queen said firmly. You proved your worthiness when you chose to sacrifice yourself for an unknown child. This is not a burden, Marcus Chen. It is the greatest honor we can give. Marcus wanted to argue more, but he was still too weak. The healing tubes pulsed gently, sending warm energy through his body. Despite his worry about being trapped, he had to admit he felt better than he had in years. Over the following days, Marcus learned about the Zephyrians. They were an ancient race that had grown beyond the need for metal ships and weapons. Everything they used was alive. Their ships were grown like plants, their tools were trained animals, and their cities were vast living organisms. Princess Kira stayed with him constantly. She was young even by Zephyrian standards, maybe equivalent to a 5-year-old human child. She couldn't speak his language yet, but she could share emotions and simple images through touch. Marcus found himself growing fond of the little princess. She showed him memories of her world, beautiful crystal cities that sang in the wind, vast forests where the trees grew in spirals toward the sky, and oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life. It was like living in a fairy tale, but there was darkness too. Kira shared memories of the war, the metal ships that came from the dark parts of space bringing death and destruction. The beings who flew those ships were called the Dominion, and they wanted to capture and use Zephyrian biotechnology for their own evil purposes. They have no honor, Queen Lyrali explained during one of her visits. They see our living ships and want to enslave them. They see our peaceful nature and think it makes us weak. Are you losing? Marcus asked. The queen's scales darkened with sadness. We are not a warrior people. We fight only to defend ourselves, and we try not to kill our enemies, but they show us no such mercy. Marcus thought about this. He had been a soldier before becoming a cargo pilot. He understood war in a way these peaceful beings didn't. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, he said quietly. What do you mean? Sometimes being nice isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to protect what you love. The queen looked troubled by this idea. That is not our way. Maybe that's why you're losing. As Marcus grew stronger, he was allowed to walk around the ship. It was incredible. The walls were warm and slightly soft, like skin. The ship responded to the crew's thoughts and emotions. It was more like being inside a friendly giant than riding in a machine. The crew was fascinated by Marcus. They had never seen anything like a human before. They were amazed by his quick healing, his adaptability, and especially by his willingness to sacrifice himself for Kira. We have searched the galaxy for millions of years, one of the healers told him. We have met many species, but none with your kind of courage. You saved our princess without thinking about yourself at all. Marcus felt embarrassed by all the attention. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, the healer said seriously. They would not. Most species think only of themselves and their own kind. You protected someone completely different from you. This is very rare. Through his connection with Kira, Marcus began to understand Zephyrian culture better. They valued life above all else, not just their own lives, but all life. They couldn't understand how the Dominion could be so cruel and destructive. But Marcus was beginning to understand something the Zephyrians didn't. Sometimes cruel people only understood cruelty. Sometimes you had to speak their language to protect the innocent. He tried to explain this to Queen Lyrale, but she resisted the idea. If we become like them, how are we different from them? You stay different by choosing who deserves your mercy, Marcus said. Some people earn kindness. Others only understand force. The queen looked at him with something like fear in her ancient eyes. You speak of dark things, Marcus Chen. I speak of necessary things. As the days passed, Marcus realized he was changing too. The constant connection to Kira and the peaceful energy of the ship was making him calmer and more thoughtful. He still believed in fighting when necessary, But he was beginning to understand the Zephyrian way too. Maybe there was a middle path, a way to be strong enough to win the war but gentle enough to remain good. But first, he had to convince Queen Lyrelei to let him help, and that meant proving that sometimes protecting the innocent required more than just good intentions. It required being willing to do whatever it takes. Marcus felt strong enough to argue after 2 weeks of healing. He found Queen Lyrelei in the ship's heart chamber, a beautiful room where the walls pulsed with gentle light like a heartbeat. "I need to go home," he said directly. "My people will think I'm dead. I have responsibilities." The queen turned from the living console she had been tending. Her silver scales reflected the chamber's light, making her look like she was made of starlight. "I understand your feelings, Marcus Chen, but the Kethmarin bond cannot be broken. It would bring dishonor to both our species." "I never agreed to any bond," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I just did what anyone decent would do." "Exactly," the queen said with a sad smile. "You acted without thought of reward or consequence. This proves the purity of your soul. That is why the bond exists, to recognize true guardianship when it appears." Marcus ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "Look, I'm grateful you saved my life, but you can't just keep me here forever. That's kidnapping. We prefer to think of it as sacred duty," the queen replied gently. Before Marcus could respond, Princess Kira came running into the chamber. She had grown during his recovery, not physically but in confidence and understanding. She could now share complex thoughts and emotions through their strange connection. Kira ran up to Marcus and pressed her small hands against his arm. Suddenly his mind filled with images and feelings. He saw himself through her eyes, not as a prisoner but as family. He felt her fear that he might leave and her deep gratitude for saving her life. But mixed with those feelings were new images, things Kira was learning about human culture from the ship's records. She showed him human families, human bonds of love and protection. She was trying to tell him that she understood what family meant to his species too. "She's been studying your people," Queen Lyrelei said, watching the exchange. "She wanted to understand why you saved her." "And what did you find?" Marcus asked Kira directly. The little princess shared another image. Humans protecting their children, human soldiers defending their homes, human parents sacrificing for their families. Then she showed him her conclusion. Marcus had treated her like family from the moment he met her. "She believes you already knew she was family," the queen translated. "That humans have a special ability to expand their protective instincts to include anyone who needs protection." Marcus felt his arguments weakening. The truth was he had been thinking of Kira as family. In the weeks of recovery, watching her grow and learn, he had developed feelings for the little princess that surprised him. "That doesn't change the fact that I have a life somewhere else," he said, but with less conviction. "Do you?" the queen asked gently. "Tell me about this life." Marcus opened his mouth to describe his cargo runs, his small apartment on the mining station, his routine existence. But as he tried to put it into words, he realized how empty it all sounded. He had no family, few friends, no real purpose beyond moving cargo from one place to another. "I have work," he said weakly. "Anyone can move cargo," the queen said, "but only you can be Kira's guardian. Only you have proven worthy of the Kethmarin bond." The conversation was interrupted by urgent musical tones from the ship's communication system. Queen Lyrelei touched the living console, and the chamber filled with holographic images. Marcus saw space battle unfolding nearby. Dominion ships, the dark metal ones, were attacking a small convoy of Zephyrian vessels. The crystal ships were trying to defend themselves, but they were clearly outmatched. "We must help them," the queen said, her scales darkening with worry. "With what?" Marcus asked, watching the battle. "Your people are fighting with one hand tied behind their backs." The queen looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" Marcus pointed at the images. "Look at how they fight. It's beautiful, like a dance, but it's not effective. Your ships move in patterns, follow rules. The Dominion ships just try to destroy everything as fast as possible. Combat is an art form for us," the queen said stiffly. "We do not simply destroy." "And that's why you're losing," Marcus replied bluntly. "Art doesn't stop people who want to kill you." As they watched, one of the Zephyrian ships was overwhelmed and destroyed. The remaining vessels were forced to retreat, leaving their cargo behind for the Dominion to steal. "How many convoys have you lost this way?" Marcus asked. The Queen's silence was answer enough. "Let me help," Marcus said urgently. "I know how to fight wars. I know how to think like the Dominion. You would have us become monsters like them?" "No," Marcus said firmly. "I would have you become smart enough to beat them. There's a difference between being ruthless and being effective." Over the following days, Marcus convinced Queen Lyrelay to let him observe Zephyrian military tactics. What he saw frustrated him. The Zephyrians were incredibly advanced, with weapons and ships beyond anything humans had ever dreamed of. But they used their advantages poorly. Their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy. Their tactics focused on minimizing casualties, even enemy casualties. Their ships moved in beautiful, synchronized patterns that were easy to predict and counter. "You're fighting by rules that your enemies don't follow," Marcus explained to the ship's commander, a graceful being named Thelos. "It's like playing chess against someone who's allowed to move their pieces however they want. But if we abandon our principles, what separates us from the Dominion?" Thelos asked. "Results," Marcus said bluntly. "Dead principles don't protect anyone." Marcus began suggesting small changes, modifications to attack patterns, improvements to targeting systems, adjustments to ship formations. The Zephyrians were reluctant at first, but when they tested Marcus's ideas in simulations, the results were impressive. Princess Kira watched these sessions with intense interest. Through their connection, Marcus could feel her quick mind absorbing everything. She was learning not just about tactics, but about the human way of thinking. Practical, adaptable, focused on outcomes rather than methods. "You're teaching her to be a warrior," Queen Lyrelay observed one day. "I'm teaching her to be a protector," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference. A warrior fights for glory or conquest. A protector fights for those who can't fight for themselves." The Queen considered this. "And what of your own desires? Do you still wish to leave us?" Marcus looked at Princess Kira, who was excitedly showing him a new defensive formation she had designed based on his lessons. The little princess had become the light of his life in ways he hadn't expected. "I still think I should have a choice," he said honestly, "but I'm starting to understand why the choice matters less than what I choose to do with it." Meaning? Meaning maybe being trapped somewhere isn't the worst thing if it's somewhere you're needed. That night, as Marcus was preparing to sleep, Princess Kira came to his quarters. She climbed onto his bed and curled up next to him, something she had started doing during his recovery. Through their connection, she shared a complex set of emotions and images. She showed him her fears about the war, her worries about her people, and her growing understanding of what it meant to be a leader. But most powerfully, she shared her love for him, not just gratitude, but the deep, trusting love of a child for a parent. "I love you too, little princess," Marcus whispered, and he meant it completely. As Kira drifted off to sleep, Marcus realized that Queen Lyrelay was right about one thing. The bond between him and Kira couldn't be broken because it wasn't really about duty or honor. It was about love and the natural human instinct to protect those who mattered. The question wasn't whether he would stay. The question was what he would do with the time he had to prepare Kira and her people for the battles ahead. Outside his window, the stars looked different than they had when he was just a cargo pilot. Now they looked like a battlefield where good people needed protection, and Marcus was beginning to understand that maybe this was exactly where he belonged. The alarm woke Marcus before dawn. The ship's walls pulsed red with urgent warning lights, and he could hear running footsteps in the corridors. He jumped out of bed and quickly put on the living armor the Zephyrians had grown for him. Princess Kira burst into his room, her scales bright with excitement and fear. Through their connection, she shared the news. The largest Dominion fleet anyone had ever seen was heading straight for the Zephyrian homeworlds. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked as they ran toward the command center. Kira showed him an image of star charts with timing calculations. 3 days, maybe less. Queen Lyrelay was waiting in the command center, surrounded by her military advisors. The room buzzed with urgent conversations in the musical Zephyrian language. When she saw Marcus, relief flooded her features. "They have over 300 ships," she said without greeting. "Our scouts barely escaped to bring us the warning." Marcus studied the tactical displays floating in the air around them. The Dominion fleet was massive, a wall of dark metal ships bristling with weapons. Against them, the Zephyrians had perhaps 60 vessels, beautiful and graceful but not built for this kind of warfare. "What's the plan?" Marcus asked. "We will meet them at the Crystal Fields," Commander Thalos said, indicating a star system filled with defensive platforms. "Our ancestors built fortifications there centuries ago." Marcus shook his head. "That's exactly what they expect you to do. They'll have planned for a defensive battle." "What do you suggest?" Queen Lyrelay asked. Marcus pointed to the star map. "Don't meet them where they expect. Hit them where they're not ready for you." "Explain." "They're moving in a straight line toward your home worlds, right? They think you'll either run away or try to defend the Crystal Fields. But what if you do neither?" Marcus highlighted several points on the map. "Split your fleet. Send a small force to the Crystal Fields to make them think you're following the plan. Then take your main fleet here, here, and here." He indicated positions along the Dominion fleet's flanks. "Ambush tactics," Thalos said with disapproval. "That is not honorable combat." "Honor doesn't matter if everyone you're trying to protect is dead," Marcus shot back. Queen Lyrelay studied the proposed positions. "You're asking us to attack from hiding, to strike without warning. I'm asking you to win," Marcus said firmly. "The Dominion doesn't care about honor. They only understand strength. Show them strength." The debate continued for hours. Many of the Zephyrian commanders were uncomfortable with Marcus's aggressive tactics. They preferred face-to-face combat, where both sides could demonstrate their skill and courage, but as reports came in of Dominion ships destroying everything in their path, including refugee convoys and hospital ships, the mood began to change. "They killed the healers," one commander reported, his scales dark with grief. "The ship was clearly marked as medical, but they destroyed it anyway." "The children's transport from Sector 7 is gone too," another added. "No survivors." Marcus watched Queen Lyrelay's face as the reports continued. He could see her internal struggle, her peaceful nature warring with her duty to protect her people. Finally, she made her decision. "Marcus Chen, you will advise our fleet commanders. We will try your tactics." The next 2 days were a rush of preparation. Marcus worked with each ship captain, explaining human military strategy and how to adapt it to Zephyrian technology. It was frustrating. Their weapons were incredibly powerful, but they had been designed for precision and minimal damage. Their ships could move in ways that defied physics, but they had always used that ability for defense rather than attack. Princess Kira stayed by his side throughout the preparations, absorbing every lesson. Her young mind grasped the concepts quickly, and she began making suggestions that surprised even Marcus. "What if we use the songships here?" she asked, pointing to a position on the tactical display. Songships were Zephyrian vessels that could generate harmonic frequencies to disrupt enemy electronics. They had always been used defensively, but Kira was suggesting an offensive application. "That could work," Marcus said, impressed. "If we coordinate it with the main attack." Together they refined the battle plan. Marcus provided the strategic thinking, while Kira contributed her intuitive understanding of Zephyrian technology and capabilities. When the battle began, everything went wrong. The Dominion fleet was larger than expected, over 400 ships instead of 300. Their technology had improved too. They had new shields that partially blocked Zephyrian energy weapons. Worst of all, they had learned from previous battles. Instead of following predictable patterns, they split their own forces and began attacking from multiple directions. "They're adapting," Marcus realized as he watched the battle unfold from the command ship. "Someone on their side is learning from our tactics." The ambush succeeded initially, with Zephyrian forces hitting the Dominion flanks hard. But the enemy recovered quickly and began a coordinated counterattack that pushed the Zephyrians back. "We're losing," Queen Lyrelay said, her scales pale with worry. Marcus studied the display, looking for weaknesses in the Dominion formation. There, a gap in their lines where two groups had spread too far apart pursuing fleeing Zephyrian ships. "Kira, can you contact the songships directly?" The princess nodded and placed her hands on the communication console. Her empathic abilities let her coordinate with the other Zephyrian ships much faster than normal communications. "Tell them to move to these coordinates," Marcus said, highlighting the gap. "And tell Captain Velos to prepare for a synchronized strike." What happened next was unlike anything seen before in galactic warfare. The songships moved into position and began their harmonic attack. But instead of trying to disable the Dominion ships, they created a resonance pattern that Marcus had designed. The pattern didn't hurt the enemy directly. Instead, It interfered with their coordination systems, making it impossible for them to communicate with each other. For a few crucial minutes, each Dominion ship thought it was fighting alone. In that moment of confusion, the main Zephyrian fleet struck with everything they had, but they didn't use their usual elegant tactics. They fought like humans, fast, dirty, and effective. The gap in the Dominion line became a wound, then a rout. Zephyrian ships poured through, attacking the larger enemy vessels from behind where their shields were weakest. But the cost was terrible. The Dominion ships, realizing they were losing, began targeting anything they could reach, including the hospital ships and refugee convoys that the Zephyrians had tried to keep safe. "They're killing everyone," Thalos reported, his voice breaking. "Military, civilian, it doesn't matter to them." That's when Princess Kira did something that shocked everyone. The little princess suddenly stood up and walked to the center of the command center. Her scales began to glow brighter than Marcus had ever seen before. She placed her hands on the main communication array and closed her eyes. "What is she doing?" Queen Lirelei gasped. Marcus could feel it through their connection. Kira was reaching out with her empathic abilities, but not to communicate. She was trying to touch the minds of every Dominion soldier in the fleet. "She's going to hurt herself," Marcus realized. "The strain is too much." But before he could stop her, Kira's power reached its target. Every cybernetic system in the Dominion fleet suddenly experienced the same emotion: pure, innocent terror. Not the battle rage they were used to, but the helpless fear of a small child watching her family die. The effect was devastating. Dominion soldiers who had spent years suppressing their emotions suddenly felt the full weight of what they were doing. Ship after ship began shutting down as their crews either fled or collapsed under the emotional assault. But the effort was killing Kira. Her scales were losing their glow, and she was shaking with exhaustion. Marcus ran to her and gathered her in his arms. "That's enough, Princess. You did it." Through their connection, he could feel her fading. She had given everything she had to save her people, and it might have cost her life. The battle was over. The Dominion fleet was in full retreat, their formation shattered and their will broken. But as Marcus held the unconscious princess, he wasn't sure if they had really won. "Get her to the healing chambers," Queen Lirelei ordered, tears flowing down her scaled cheeks. "Now." As they rushed Kira to the medical bay, Marcus realized something important had changed. The Zephyrians had won their first major victory against the Dominion, but they had done it by abandoning many of their peaceful principles. They had fought like humans, ruthlessly, effectively, and without mercy for their enemies. The question was, what kind of people would they become if they kept fighting this way? And was saving their civilization worth changing who they were? Marcus looked down at the pale, unconscious princess in his arms, and knew that whatever the cost, he would pay it to keep her safe, even if it meant teaching her people to become something they had never wanted to be. Princess Kira slept for 6 days. The healers worked constantly, their biomachines humming softly as they tried to repair the damage she had done to herself. Marcus never left her side, holding her small hand and sharing what strength he could through their connection. When she finally woke up, her first thought wasn't about her own pain. Through their bond, Marcus felt her immediate concern for her people, for the outcome of the battle, and for him. "We won," he told her gently. "The Dominion fleet retreated. You saved everyone." Kira's scales flickered weakly, showing relief mixed with sadness. She had felt the cost of victory. The Zephyrian ships that had been forced to destroy their enemies completely, the soldiers who had killed without mercy, the innocence her people had lost. "I know," Marcus said, understanding her emotions. "It wasn't the kind of victory your grandmother wanted, but it was the kind you needed." Over the following days, as Kira recovered, Marcus saw the changes the war had brought to the Zephyrian Empire. The ships that returned from battle looked different, harder, more aggressive. The crew moved with military precision instead of graceful flow. They had won, but they had become something new in the process. Some Zephyrians blamed Marcus for the change. They said he had corrupted their peaceful nature and turned them into killers. Others argued that he had saved them from extinction. The debates echoed through the ship's corridors in musical arguments that sometimes lasted for hours. Queen Lirelei seemed to age years in those few days. Her silver scales had lost some of their shine, and her movements were less graceful. The weight of command during wartime was wearing on her peaceful soul, I don't know if we're still the same people we were before, she confessed to Marcus one evening as they watched Kira sleep. Your tactics worked, but they required us to become something we had never been. Change isn't always bad, Marcus replied. Sometimes it's necessary for survival, but at what cost? If we become like the Dominion, have we really won anything? Marcus considered this carefully. It was the same question that had haunted him since the battle, whether victory was worth the price they had paid for it. The difference is choice, he said finally. The Dominion chooses to be cruel because they enjoy it. You chose to be hard because you had to protect innocent people. The why matters as much as the what. Queen Lyralee was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that surprised Marcus. I have been researching your species. My species? Humans. I wanted to understand how you think, how you balance compassion with pragmatism. What I found was remarkable. She touched a control and the air filled with holographic images, scenes from human history. Marcus saw soldiers protecting civilians, doctors treating enemies, parents sacrificing for children they had never met. Your people have fought wars for thousands of years, the Queen continued. You have done terrible things in the name of survival. But you have also done beautiful things in the name of love. You seem to understand something we are only now learning, which is that protecting the innocent sometimes requires becoming dangerous yourself. That love without strength is useless, but strength without love is monstrous. Marcus nodded. We learned it the hard way. Through a lot of mistakes and a lot of pain. I have made a decision, Queen Lyralee said suddenly, about you and the Kethmarin bond. Marcus felt his heart skip. What kind of decision? I have found a way to release you from your obligation to us. If you truly wish to return to your own people, I will not stop you. Marcus stared at her in shock. After weeks of being told the bond was unbreakable, this came as a complete surprise. How? By acknowledging that the bond was formed under incomplete information. You could not give true consent because you did not understand what it meant. Therefore, it can be dissolved without dishonor to either side. And you're willing to do that? The Queen's scales shimmered with sadness. If it is what you truly want, yes. But I must ask, is it what you want? Before Marcus could answer, Kira stirred on her healing bed. Her eyes opened and she looked directly at him. Through their connection, he felt her question, the same one the Queen had just asked. Do you want to leave us? Marcus looked into those large, trusting eyes and felt his heart break a little. This little princess had become more than just his responsibility. She was his family in ways that biology couldn't create. What would happen to Kira if I left? He asked. She would have other guardians, the Queen said. She would be safe. That's not what I meant. What would happen to her? Queen Lyralee's silence told him everything he needed to know. Kira had bonded with him completely. Losing him wouldn't just hurt her. It would damage her ability to trust and love. And what about the war? The Dominion won't just give up because you won one battle. We will continue to fight as you have taught us, but the choice of whether to be part of that fight should be yours. Marcus thought about his old life, the lonely cargo runs, the empty apartment, the routine existence without real purpose. Then he thought about what he had here, a family, a cause worth fighting for, and people who needed the perspective he could provide. But most of all, he thought about the little girl who had trusted him completely from the moment they met. Can I ask for something instead of leaving? Marcus said finally. What? I want to be an ambassador. Between your people and mine. The Queen's eyes widened with interest. Explain. Your people and humans need each other. You have technology and wisdom we could learn from. We have experience with warfare and pragmatism you need to survive. Instead of releasing me from the bond, expand it. Marcus stood up and walked to Kira's bedside. She was watching him with bright, hopeful eyes. Let me go back to human space, he continued. But not alone. Let me take a delegation of Zephyrians with me. Let me be the bridge between our species. That would be unprecedented, the Queen said slowly. So was a human protecting a Zephyrian princess. Sometimes unprecedented is exactly what's needed. Through her connection with Marcus, Kira suddenly sat up in bed. Her scales brightened with excitement as she understood the plan. She looked at her grandmother and began sharing rapid images and emotions, visions of humans and Zephyrians working together, learning from each other, becoming something greater than either species could be alone. She likes the idea, Marcus said with a smile. Queen Lyrelei watched the exchange between Marcus and her granddaughter. She saw the love there, the trust, the bond that had grown beyond duty into true family. "You would come back?" she asked. "Of course. This is home now. Kira is my family and you're my people too. I'm not leaving. I'm expanding." The queen was quiet for a long time, considering the proposal. Then she smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her since the battle. "Ambassador Marcus Chen," she said formally. "I like the sound of that." Kira squeaked with joy and threw her arms around Marcus. Through their connection, he felt her happiness, her love, and her absolute certainty that this was the right path. "When do we leave?" Marcus asked. "As soon as Kira is strong enough to travel," the queen replied. "She will be part of the delegation, of course." "Of course," Marcus agreed. The idea of being separated from the little princess was unthinkable anyway. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood on the bridge of a hybrid ship, part Zephyrian biotechnology, part human engineering. It was the first vessel of its kind, a symbol of what cooperation between the species could achieve. Kira stood beside him, her scales bright with excitement as they approached the edge of human space. She was eager to meet his people and share the wonders of Zephyrian culture with them. "Nervous?" Marcus asked her. Through their connection, she shared her feelings, not nervousness but anticipation. She saw this not as leaving home but as expanding the definition of home to include an entire galaxy. Queen Lyrelei had given them a mission that was both simple and incredibly complex. Prove that different species could work together not just to survive, but to thrive. As the ship crossed into human territory, Marcus thought about how far he had come from being a simple cargo pilot. He had protected one alien child with his body, and now he was protecting 2 entire species with his heart. The future stretched ahead of them, full of challenges and possibilities. But Marcus wasn't worried. He had learned something important during his time with the Zephyrians. Love was the strongest force in the universe, and it could bridge any gap, even the one between the stars. Behind them, the Zephyrian fleet continued their war against the Dominion, fighting with new tactics and harder hearts. Ahead of them, human space waited to meet their first alien allies. And between them all, a former cargo pilot and an alien princess carried the hopes of 2 species toward a future where being different wasn't a reason to fight, but a reason to grow stronger together. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, Marcus believed they could not just win it, but win it without losing themselves in the process. That was worth protecting with everything he had.